by me, finishing my life. Okay, and then I decide, well, it's a good life. I've done a lot of good stuff up to date. I may not have done it all right, but I don't think anybody does.
Did you recognise that your ability was still with you, even if the finance wasn't? See,
Correct.
I think that's an important thing for people, people who were considered entrepreneurial or whatever. Just because it's all gone, fellas, don't think your skills have left you.
Oh, no, they don't.
And your abilities.
That's the problem with commerce as well, Vin, when you get caught up in the commercial aspect of things. You sort of do leave your trades and other skills behind when you start dealing with trying to be commercially successful and profit. And psychologically, you kind of leave them behind. And it's very difficult. I know how difficult it is to go back and say, well, can I reinvent myself, or can I bring back the skills I had to do certain things? I mean, a simple thing like, doing work around the house or the home, or going out and chopping wood and, doing maintenance and management and repairs yourself. It's amazing what you can get back into being able to do, on a physical level as well as a mental level. And I think that's one thing that helped save me as well. I started doing some physical stuff as well. And people started asking me to do some physical stuff, which got my mind away from the commercial aspects of it as well. So I don't know if that's of any use to anybody, but there you go. So look, just in summary, you don't need to look. All I say is don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Make the call to TNS Radio, or make the call to me or Vin, or you make the call to somebody and go through it. And if it's finance, it's so easy. It's so damn easy to sort the financial stuff out. It really is.
Can we get to that, Darrel? For example, just in case somebody's listening to this and they are feeling that way, once certain questions, the power of questions, as I said, but once you actually put certain questions to the banks or to these individuals and entities, what happens to them, Darrel?
They shut up shop. They
collapse,
seem to...
like a house of cards, right?
Yeah, the shutters come down.
Did that shock you?
Yeah, and that does teach you a lot. Now, I'll tell you, this is worth... We're getting into the book now, I think. And I know we've had a long introduction. But, right, so up in Belfast with Jim and a couple of other friends, 2 days there, they were teaching us to write letters in a legal context and the lawful context. And we simply learned how to write the first letter. It's only a one-pager. And as I said, I didn't understand it fully when I wrote it first. But I came down from Belfast and I put it to my wife. I said, look, I don't know what I'm doing here, but it seems like it could be an option. And gut-wise, it feels right. It just feels right. And it feels like I'm actually going to be able to do something by writing this first letter. It actually feels like I'm achieving something by saying to the bank, right, that's what's happened in the past. Now, I draw a line there, because I now understand there may be something else up here. So what you're doing is you're asking questions, the power of asking questions, as you say, Vin. You're asking 3 questions. You're asking the bank to validate and document their allegations. Their allegation most banks will have is, well, they will allege that you owe them money, a debt, a mortgage, an insurance, a loan, a fine, a fee, a charge, a credit card, a debt, as I say, debt. So a bank will allege these things. So this is a very useful word, I think, for people, allegation. It's an allegation. That's all it is. Is that right, Finn?
Well, not quite, but,
I shouldn't have asked you, is it right? But that's the word I use. I perceive that these things that the banks are accusing me of are allegations. They're accusing me of owing them a debt of money.
Okay, from my perspective, I never looked at it that way, but that's just my perspective would be different.
Okay, what's your perspective then?
My perspective was that I'm sure that somebody in there wanted me to see it that way, but I never saw it that way.
Okay, explain that now, because I haven't heard this before now.
Well, as I say, banks, for example, send out statements, right? They don't send invoices. And if anybody asks for an invoice to try and close and settle any matters that may exist, they still don't send invoices.
Yeah.
That led me to examine the nature of the relationship between what I would have called previously customer and service provider, and the only definition I could find to fit the actual relationship after I inspected it closely was employee, bank, and employer, so-called customer. And that's why when they say your account, your loan, they didn't mean your account. because it's their account. But when they said your account, they meant the account you asked us for permission to handle, and we granted it to you as an employee, a very, very low-level employee, but as an employee nonetheless.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And then
you're managing an account.
Yeah, you're an account manager. It's a position, an employment position. And when they don't care, basically, once they've either got a 0 or a plus figure, they don't care. Once it drops below 0, they start paying attention to you.
Yeah, it's been mismanaged.
Maybe
it's not being mismanaged. Maybe that's the way it should be managed.
Well, either way, but once it drops below the goose egg, they start to pay attention to you.
Yeah.
And once they do that, they don't care if you have to go and get funds or finance, whatever you want to call it, from anywhere. They don't care where it comes from as long as you put it in. And we, like idiots, in my opinion, use our own funds to put into the bank.
Yeah.
And we're reducing the funds out there by doing so. In other words, we're all drinking from a decreasing water hole.
Yeah, yeah.
And they actually have us doing battle with each other to get more and more from the drying up water hole. And
that's a competition thing again. Yeah, survival of the fittest. Yeah. They set the game up. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, no, I get that. That's a very appropriate thing to say at this juncture. Although it's only something that I've heard from you recently about the relationship between you being an employee of the bank in terms of relationship.
Well, again, I do want to stick to the book, but I wanted to get that in there because I think it's important that people realize that when you wrote the book at the time, that's where you were at the time, but that you have moved on since.
I hope so.
Well, I think yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll get back to just because we don't want to lose people as well when they're reading the book. So that's a good point you made, a very, very valid point. And it's probably something we could examine a bit more. We do examine these things with the workshop as well.
Very happy, exactly. Well, I'm very happy to do more interviews about this, Darrel, in the future. So keep an eye out here, folks, for more interviews with Darrel later on. But continue anyway for the moment.
Okay. So where were we? I don't want to reiterate, but I will. Down from Belfast, spoke to my wife. My wife didn't want me to do this. She didn't want me to challenge the bank at the time. And I said, no, I don't perceive I said, this is one of the options that I have, and I want to take this option up because it just feels right. Now, it also felt, well, I'm going to poke a finger in one of the eyes here of the bank. I want to see what happens, if you like. So it got into my head then, well, look, I'll treat this as an experiment. And I come up with this. I coined the phrase at the time. I don't know if anybody else had created this phrase, but I coined the phrase a social experiment.
Yep.
So we'll call it a social experiment. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be because it's an experiment. You don't know what the results are going to be of experiments. So we sent the first letter off. I think it was to the Bank of Ireland. And we legally asked them if they could substantiate their claims, their allegations. Now, it's very important to note here that we weren't refusing to pay anything, okay, and that we were more than willing to pay on the basis that the bank could verify and document the obligation based upon their allegations that there was a debt of money owed. So we asked the bank to provide us with an invoice and or an affidavit, a contract, and a set of the bank's accounts. So it's very important just to reiterate that for the listeners again. We wanted the bank to provide us with an invoice that was signed and validated and or an affidavit, which is a sworn statement that what they're saying is true and correct.
And can you explain your reasoned thinking as to why you were looking for such a thing?
Okay. I won't explain that yet, Vin, because at the time, I didn't have any reasoned thinking.
Okay.
And I have to be honest, I didn't. I just thought, well, we'll try this and see what happens.
So would you say then that this was your version of, look, I need to put the brakes on here, I need to throw a spanner in the works quick. So this was your spanner in the works.
That's my spanner in the works. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't know what response I'd get. And I honestly thought, well, after writing the letter, that, well, they are going to send me an invoice and an affidavit. They are going to send me a contract, and they are going to send me a set of their accounts, the bank's accounts, to validate their claim. And I just sent it off. I thought, well, I've got 10 days, because I'll give them 10 days to respond and send all this documented evidence. Vin, can we take a break just for a second?
Absolutely.
Yeah, as I was saying there, Vin, I wrote the first letter, and the exact date I wrote the first letter was the 19th of February, 2010. And there is some, in hindsight, there's some errors in that letter, but as we stated there a minute ago or so, we were looking for validation of the debt via their actual accounting, verification of their claim against us, a sworn affidavit or signed invoice, and a copy of the contract binding both parties. Now, as stated earlier, I actually didn't expect not to get a response from them with all that requested information and data.
So you thought they were genuinely going to send you an invoice and everything else you requested?
Yeah.
You thought there'd be no problem for them to provide that?
Yeah, exactly. And I just thought, well, look, I might be, swinging in the wind here a bit. And I thought, well, look, I don't perceive there's any other options at the moment, so we'll give it a try. And do you know what happened?
Well, I do, but go on.
Well, for the listeners, they didn't respond. And this first letter was sent to Anya McInerney, whom I understood at the time to be part of, or at least head of their legal services. So that was the Bank of Ireland, and I sent this to Anya McInerney, whom I perceived at the time was head of group legal services, but in actual fact she wasn't as senior as I was led to believe by the bank officials. And even at that, I had trouble getting her name from the bank, because I went through all sorts of loops just trying to get her name, but the idea was that you're supposed to send these letters to the most senior legal man or woman in the bank.
Yeah, you were heading to the top of the tree.
Heading to the top of the tree. Now, there was only two people above Anya, from what I understood at the time, which I've since found out that isn't true as well. But there's only two other people that would have been above Anya at the time, and that would have been Richie Boucher, who's the CEO, and another guy called Finbar Murphy, who is, again, head of legal services. And I understand now that he's actually more senior to Anya McInerney in that office. But nonetheless, we sent the letter to Anya McInerney, requesting the three items that we've listed, the accounting, the bank's accounts, signed invoice or affidavit, and the contract, and she did not respond. And she was clearly given 10 days, as stated on the letter, to respond. Now, the letter is only one page. It quite literally is just one page. Very, very simple. She did not respond. So the 10 days elapsed, and we actually gave her a little bit more of the 10 days, because I didn't bother writing the second letter, which just reiterates the request for information. So the first letter was written on 19th of February 2010. The second letter that followed up with that was written on the 2nd of March 2010. Now, by this stage, I'd spent the 14 days or 15 days researching and reading, and now I was beginning to get an understanding of the money system and the money debt system. And I started looking at things like Zeitgeist, Addendum, which I'd recommend people read. It's not necessarily the whole truth and nothing but the truth, but certainly has a lot of good information in it.
Well, there's plenty of food for thought in there.
Sorry, Vin?
It's good food for thought.
Oh, very good food for thought. And there's actually a video on YouTube called Money Debt, the Money Debt System or something like that. There's lots of good videos out there, full-length videos, short videos. There's another one out there at the moment called The American Dream. It's done in a cartoon form, and it's very good, if you like, root level information that you can start with. It's easy digestible and easy to understand. So I started researching stuff on YouTube. Then I joined a couple of forums. Then I think around about that time as well, I sort of tapped into, I think it was TNS, and later on tnsradio.ning.com.